The conversation around rebuilding versus competing has taken over the discussion in Pittsburgh. And it feels like it happens every single year, but this time the context is very different. It is easy to say that you are fine with a rebuild in theory, that you would accept a painful season or two if it meant clarity and a real direction at the end of the tunnel. Saying it and living it are two completely different things, especially in a city like this, where football is not just something you watch. It is something that structures your week, your weekends, and even your family gatherings. The Steelers have never been wired to simply throw a season away. And for decades, that mentality came straight from the top. First with Chuck Noll and later carried on in a different form through Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin. That mindset did not disappear overnight, even if the situation around the team has clearly changed. When people point to other franchises or even other teams in the same city and say, "Look how they rebuilt. Look how they bottomed out and came back stronger," they often leave out an important detail. Those teams were willing to accept being bad in a very visible way. They were willing to endure empty stretches, losing records, and seasons that felt like they were over before they really started. The Steelers have not done that, and for a long time they were not wrong to avoid it. As long as you had a quarterback you could trust year after year, you could justify staying competitive. Even if you were not a true contender, that safety net has been gone for a long time now, and the organization has been trying to pretend it is still there. What makes the current moment so uncomfortable is the gap within the roster itself. You can see it clearly when you look at the names that still define the team. Veterans like Cam Hayward and TJ Watt remain the emotional and competitive core. Players who can still change games and demand respect across the league. At the same time, there are younger pieces who clearly belong. Players you can imagine building around for the future. The problem is the space in between. The lack of a smooth transition from one era to the next. It feels abrupt, like the team jumped from established stars straight into hopeful prospects without enough stability connecting the two. That issue becomes even more glaring when you talk about the most important position in football. The quarterback question has hovered over this franchise for years, and every temporary solution has only delayed the inevitable. You do not truly know what you have at quarterback until you put someone out there and let them live with the consequences. Practices and preseason games can tell you some things, but they will never replace real snaps when the lights are on and the pressure is real. At some point, a team has to accept that discovering the truth might come with losses, frustration, and uncomfortable Sundays. This is where the fan experience becomes part of the problem. Pittsburgh fans are passionate, loyal, and deeply knowledgeable, but they are also used to a certain baseline. Even in seasons that did not end with championships, there was always a sense that the Steelers would be competitive, that games would matter deep into the calendar. Asking that fan base to embrace a season where wins are not the priority is not just difficult. It borders on impossible. You can say you are ready for it in the off-season, when hope is cheap and optimism fills the gaps. But it feels very different when you are watching games every week and realizing that moral victories do not actually feel good. There is also the danger of illusion, of being just good enough to trick yourself into thinking you are close. You watch the team fight. You see the effort from players who are giving everything they have, and losses start to feel like they could have gone either way. That can convince you that one small change will fix everything, when in reality the foundation is still shaky. It is the worst place to be in professional sports. Not bad enough to reset completely and not good enough to truly compete. The Steelers have lived in that space for far too long. Historically, this franchise has avoided prolonged irrelevance, and that pride is justified. But history can also become a trap when it prevents necessary change. The last time the organization truly accepted being bad was so long ago that it feels almost mythical now. Something you read about rather than remember. Since then, even the down years still came with a sense of dignity and structure. That identity is powerful, but it does not solve the modern reality of a league that revolves around elite quarterback play. More than ever before, football is different from other sports in this regard. One player at one position can alter the direction of an entire franchise for a decade or more. Without that player, everything else feels like maintenance rather than progress. The Steelers have spent years searching for shortcuts around that truth, hoping that defense, culture, and toughness could compensate. Sometimes it did, at least enough to stay afloat. But staying afloat is not the same as moving forward, and that distinction is becoming harder to ignore with each passing season. The challenge now is not just about identifying the next quarterback or drafting the right player. It is about aligning expectations. From the front office to the coaching staff to the fan base itself, there has to be an understanding that prioritizing the future might mean sacrificing comfort in the present. That is not an easy sell in Pittsburgh, where winning has always been the default expectation, not the long-term reward, yet continuing to chase short-term fixes risks keeping the team stuck in the same cycle, competitive enough to care, but never strong enough to dominate. This tension is going to define every conversation around the Steelers moving forward. Every personnel decision, every snap given or not given to a young player, every close loss that feels encouraging but ultimately changes nothing will feed into the same question. Are the Steelers willing to endure discomfort now in order to finally gain clarity later? Or will they continue trying to win each individual moment without addressing the bigger picture that has been looming over the franchise for years now? Another layer of this situation that cannot be ignored is how leadership decisions ripple through the entire organization. Even after a head coach is gone, for years, the Steelers operated with a very specific philosophy, one centered on competing every single season no matter the circumstances. That approach created stability, consistency, and a strong internal culture, but it also narrowed the margin for experimentation when the priority is always the next game, the next season, or the next playoff push. Development can become secondary, especially at quarterback. Young players end up waiting, learning, and observing far longer than they should, while short-term solutions are leaned on because they feel safer in the moment. This is why the quarterback conversation keeps circling back to opportunity rather than talent alone. You can evaluate arm strength, decision-making, and poise in controlled environments, but real growth only happens when mistakes are allowed to happen publicly. That process is messy, and it rarely aligns with a win-now mindset. If a young quarterback struggles, the pressure to pull him becomes immediate, not just from fans, but from the building itself. Coaches feel it, players feel it, and suddenly the experiment is over before it ever truly begins. The result is a revolving door of stopgap options that offer familiarity but no long-term answers. What complicates things further is that the roster is not barren. There are legitimate building blocks across multiple position groups, especially on defense and along the offensive line. This is not a team starting from zero, and that makes the idea of a full tear down even less realistic. It creates a strange contradiction where the Steelers are too talented to fully collapse, but not structured in a way that naturally supports the growth of a young quarterback. Every decision becomes a balancing act between protecting the present and investing in the future. And too often the present has won out. Fans feel this contradiction every Sunday. You watch a defense that still has pride in playmakers. You see effort, physicality, and moments that remind you why this team is never an easy out. At the same time, there is an underlying sense that something fundamental is missing. That no matter how close games feel, the ceiling remains limited. That emotional push and pull is exhausting because it keeps hope alive without ever fully rewarding it. Losses hurt more when they come with the feeling that nothing truly changed afterward. The fear, moving forward, is not that the Steelers will suddenly become irrelevant. The fear is that they will remain stuck in a perpetual middle ground, where every season feels important, but none of them actually move the franchise closer to a championship foundation. This is where patience becomes the most difficult requirement. Patience with young players, patience with growing pains, and patience with seasons that might not look successful by traditional standards. In a market like Pittsburgh, patience is often viewed as surrender, even when it might actually be strategy. There is also the human element to consider. Players in that locker room are competitors, veterans, want to win now because their window is finite. Younger players want clarity, defined roles, and a sense that the organization believes in their development. If the message wavers between those two priorities, it can create confusion. Development becomes inconsistent, and accountability feels uneven. That uncertainty does not always show up in effort, but it shows up in cohesion, especially in high-pressure moments where trust and timing matter most. Looking ahead, the next phase for the Steelers will demand uncomfortable honesty. Honest evaluations of who is part of the future and who represents the past. Honest conversations about what success actually looks like in the short term versus the long term. It is not about intentionally losing games, but about accepting that growth and progress are not always measured in wins alone. That idea clashes directly with decades of organizational identity, which is why it feels so foreign and unsettling. The league itself has changed, and the margin for error at quarterback has become razor thin. Teams that find their answer gain stability almost overnight. Teams that do not are forced to improvise constantly. And improvisation rarely leads to sustained success. The Steelers have been improvising for years now, and while they have avoided disaster, they have also avoided resolution. Every season that passes without clarity at that position makes the eventual transition harder, not easier, as this new chapter unfolds. Every move will be scrutinized through the lens of what comes next, rather than what just happened. Draft picks, practice reps, game plans, and even losses will be debated not for their immediate impact, but for what they reveal about the direction of the franchise. That shift in perspective is unavoidable, because the questions surrounding this team are no longer about effort or culture. They are about vision, alignment, and whether the Steelers are finally ready to accept short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term certainty. What often gets overlooked in all of this is how much the next decisions will shape the emotional relationship between the team and its fan base. Steelers fans are not casual observers. They invest time, tradition, and identity into every season. And that makes transparency more important than ever when direction feels unclear. Frustration fills the gap. People start projecting motives, questioning competence, and arguing over intentions instead of football. A clearer sense of purpose, even if it involves growing pains, would go a long way toward restoring trust and patience. Even in a market that is famously intolerant of losing, there is also a competitive reality inside the locker room that complicates long-term planning. Players are evaluated every single week, and careers can change on a handful of snaps. Asking an organization to think years ahead while players are fighting for relevance right now creates tension. That has to be managed carefully. If younger players feel they are only placeholders, development stalls. If veterans feel their remaining time is being wasted, leadership fractures. Balancing those perspectives requires more than slogans or tradition. It requires consistency in action, even when the results are uncomfortable. At quarterback, this becomes the defining test of commitment. Giving a young player real opportunities means accepting visible mistakes and uneven performances. It means resisting the urge to chase the illusion of stability through familiar names or quick fixes. That restraint is incredibly difficult in a league built on weekly judgment, but without it, the cycle simply repeats itself. Every short-term solution delays the moment of truth, and the longer that delay lasts, the more pressure builds around whoever eventually gets the chance. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. Aaron Rodgers, the veteran quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is reportedly facing scrutiny that could shake the confidence of fans and teammates alike. Sources close to the team suggest that a detail about Rodgers' recent performance has surfaced, something the Steelers faithful have long hoped would stay under wraps. Insiders hint that while Rodgers has delivered flashes of his trademark brilliance, inconsistencies in his preparation and on-field decision-making have raised eyebrows behind the scenes. The whispers began after practices where coaches noticed a shift in Rodgers' usual precision. Team insiders describe instances of miscommunication during critical drills and moments where his timing seemed slightly off, sparking speculation that even a quarterback of his experience might be showing signs of strain. While Rodgers has built his reputation on clutch plays and veteran savvy, these behind-the-scenes observations suggest the Steelers could be confronting a new kind of challenge, balancing the legacy of a star player with the need for reliability on game day. Fans, already passionate and vocal, have been reacting to every glimpse of Rodgers' performance, dissecting each throw and decision. Social media chatter indicates a mix of concern and frustration, with some questioning whether Rodgers can maintain his elite form under mounting pressure. The revelation of this unseen detail has only amplified the tension, turning routine pre-game analysis into a potential storm of speculation and debate. Analysts argue that Rodgers' long career has conditioned him to handle scrutiny. But even the most seasoned quarterbacks are not immune to the weight of public expectation. When cracks in their armor appear, though the Steelers organization has not officially commented, whispers from inside the locker room suggest a heightened focus on support and adaptation, with coaches reportedly devising strategies to accommodate any potential vulnerabilities. Whether this will translate to changes in play calling or personnel adjustments remains uncertain. But one thing is clear, the spotlight on Rodgers has never been more intense. The combination of veteran skill, fan passion, and emerging doubts makes the situation one to watch closely in the high-stakes environment of professional football. A single detail, even one previously unnoticed, can reshape narratives, shift momentum, and ignite debates that reverberate far beyond the stadium. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.